Awesome. Welcome to the Kiwanis Club of Indianapolis for our weekly gathering. I'm going to break with tradition a little bit. My friend Casey Crouse is here. Each quarter we do a donation to a local nonprofit in honor of each of our speakers. So Mark, sorry to ruin the surprise at the end of this meeting. Last quarter we donated to New Shoe Day. They were working on advancing mental health for youth in Indianapolis. And we will have a check presentation under the cover of darkness, maybe next week, one day soon. One of the community building activities that they do, folks come together at 5:30 in the morning on Wednesdays and now Fridays and run together. So we'll do a big check presentation under the cover of darkness one of these days soon and get that out. But we did want to invite Casey to stop by for a quick minute. I know he stepped out of a meeting to take this, so very much appreciate that. But give us like the elevator of what New Shoe Day is and the difference you're making. And this is a relatively new program you launched 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the intro, and yes, super glad I was able to join today. So, but yeah, as Trina said, and we know each other through running, but my name is Casey Crouse, and yeah, I co-founded this organization called New Shoe Day, which I'll get to in a minute or two. I've lived in Indy and Carmel my whole life, married and have 3 boys who are 4 and under, and I work my day-to-day in IT consulting. But my passion, for those that know me, involves a long history of supporting our next generation and doing what we can through healthcare and experiences and resources in our communities. I've served on the board at Riley Children's Foundation, which obviously supports Riley Hospital for Children. I've served on that for the past 5 years and have a long history with them. But this other thing Trina mentioned is New Shoe Day, which also has a youth focus as well in terms of service. So New Shoe Day, we started as a group's passion project, really to connect our city together during COVID. And we did that by running around our city for 100 days straight in different neighborhoods and streets every single day. So we ran 1,000 miles. And through that, and while we were doing that, we decided that while we met people along the way, we would give them kind of a random act of kindness, which just essentially it was a nice note and some cash. And the idea was to give them a fresh start, a new beginning on whatever it is that they needed, maybe perhaps during a tough time, and start a new journey. In the same way a new pair of shoes can do that for someone, and for us as runners, that was important. That kind of gained some, we weren't prepared for the popularity that it did, but people started to give us money to then hand out to people. And typically when that happens, that's a good sign. So fast forward to today, New Shoe Day, we're a formalized 501c3 nonprofit. We provide new pairs of shoes to youth and under-resourced communities throughout central Indiana. In 2022, we gifted almost 700 pairs of new shoes, and in 2023, our pipeline has grown to be about 2,000. We do this through partnerships with youth track teams, after-school programs, social work programs, youth assistance programs, athletic departments. That list is growing, which I'm really proud of the partnerships and the growth there. But further, like Trina mentioned, we're a big believer in the confidence and the good feelings that new shoes can elicit with our youth, or really with anyone, but in New Shoe Day's focus being youth. So therefore, mental health is a passion of ours, and we offer ways to support our partners if they need it. Last year, we helped develop some basic building blocks curriculum for the youth that we supported to learn the fundamentals of mental health. And that was put in front of almost 2,500 kids, which was awesome for us. And then we've also helped a few of our partners by providing and sponsoring youth mental health first aid training, which has been super powerful and something that we want to do more of, along with more shoe giveaways. But, real quick, where do we grow from here with support like yours? We want to continue to grow and grow thoughtfully. We are learning that the demand is not hard to find. But as we think ahead, we're hoping to develop, more formalized fundraising strategies and partners to help us meet that need. Our goal is to provide 10,000 new shoe days by the end of 2025. So I just threw our website in the chat if you want to take a look at it, learn more about us, learn more about our board and the way that we're acting and operating as a nonprofit and the goals that we have. So thank you for this few minutes to share more on New Shoe Day. We appreciate it greatly. And then, more importantly, just the support and the monetary support that you're providing that'll allow us to create more impact for our partners. And it means the world of us or for us. And I can't wait to celebrate it with the team and go out and execute on that. So thank you.
Thanks, Casey. I will see you next Wednesday.
Perfect.
I appreciate it very much.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you.
Thank you. Now we can kind of pivot back to our normal agenda. I'm going to turn the mic over to Greg Silver. He has, he'll, in lieu of an invocation, I don't even know what to say, but it's Greg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. By the way, that prior discussion was so important, and it looks like the shoe fits for us to be involved with that.
Well played. Well played.
Thank you. Well, as everyone knows, everyone knows that this is the anniversary of the walk on the moon. I don't think there's any doubt you all knew that. So I have a little thing about that moon landing that I was going to read, and thanks to Kelly for this information. At 9:32 a.m., the engines fire and Apollo 11 clears the tower. About 20 minutes later, the crew is in Earth orbit. After 1.5 orbits, Apollo 11 gets a go for what mission controllers call translunar injection. It's time to head for the moon. 3 days later, the crew was or is in lunar orbit. When the lunar module lands at 4:17 p.m. the next day, only 30 seconds of fuel remain. Neil Armstrong radios Houston, quote, "Tranquility Base here," end of quote. The Eagle has landed, those famous words, end of quote. Mission control erupts in celebration as the tension breaks. At 10:56, Armstrong is ready to plant the first human foot on another world. With more than 500 million people watching on TV that day, he climbs down the ladder and proclaims, quote, "That's one small step for a man, one giant step for mankind." He and Buzz Aldrin explored the surface for 2.5 hours, collecting samples and taking photographs. They leave behind an American flag, a patch honoring the fallen Apollo 1 crew, and a plaque on one of the Eagle's legs. It reads, quote, "Here men from planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. July 1969 AD, we came in peace for all mankind," end of quote. Thank you very much for letting me read that. I wanted to show you, you can put me back on, Trina, what a liftoff looks like some of you may know that David Wolf is my cousin, and this picture is one I took at Cocoa Beach when he lifted off. It's an extraordinary picture in its own way. So I thought maybe I'd share that with you because I have it in my archives. And David, here's another picture of David. David went up to the Mir and went up to the space station several times. So thank you, and remember the big picture of why we are here in this world. Thanks, Trina.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. I know we've got maybe a couple of guests with us today. If you want to introduce yourself via chat, please feel free. If you're a member and want to introduce yourself by chat, feel free as well. I'd like to recognize some members who are celebrating Kiwanis anniversaries this week. Recognizing 41 years for past president Rob Slagle, who is also the football and Abe Lincoln Scholarship Committee members. And he helped launch the Capital City Action Club back in 1994. I believe he's been involved with the Action Club ever since. Mary Bulk, our president designate, is celebrating 31 years this week. 30 years for past president and Abe Lincoln Committee member, as well as Speedway High School Key Club liaison, Steve Willem. Perry Meridian Key Club liaison Lou Drexler is also marking 30 years. Past president and foundation board member Karen Burns is celebrating 24 years as a club member. And last but not least, Lieutenant Governor and our club and foundation board treasurer, Roger Cummings, has been with us for 22 years. Besides the longevity of our members, I also took away from this list just how involved our members really are in the legacies that everyone's creating and leaving. So thank you to these folks for their service and for their deep, deep involvement. Our next club board meeting is next Tuesday, the 25th at 8 a.m. It's going to be held on Zoom. The foundation board will meet on August 16th to approve funding for projects planned for 2024. Can't believe we're already thinking about 2024. There's also a Kiwanis, Indiana District Convention at the Sheridan Keystone at the Crossing on Saturday, August 12th. If anyone's interested in attending, let me know, let Kelly know. There's a link to register on the district website, as well as more information about the agenda. And then we'll be back at the Columbia Club next Thursday at noon. We're gonna shake up the agenda a little bit, and rather than looking into our community, we're going to look at ourselves. Mary Bulk is gonna help lead us through some future visioning of the club, setting priorities for the coming year and beyond. Huge thank you to Mary for her role in this, and Nancy Ulrichs, who has really spearheaded and lent a tremendous amount of professional experience and wisdom as we've shaped this program. It is a little bit longer than our typical lunch, so I will say thank you many, many times over for giving that additional time and helping us move forward as a club. We have also invited the city's Department of Metropolitan Development to speak about South Downtown's connectivity vision plan, and we're confirming the date, but have our fingers crossed for the 10th of August. And we've scheduled 2 Zoom meetings coming up in August as well. Matt Shirk, Community Outreach Coordinator for the Indiana Donor Network, will be with us on the 17th. And then the 24th, Dr. Edward Curtis and Father Anthony Yeski, I'm sorry, I apologize, on Arab Indianapolis, Indy's first Arab-speaking neighborhood from the early 1900s, which is located near Lucas Oil Stadium. IOZO's Lunch Bunch will be on the 3rd Monday of each month. So the next couple are August 21st and September 18th. Keep your eye on the newsletter and Facebook. We have some service opportunities coming up. This is something that our members have asked for, more hands-on service. So we'll be working with Coats for Kids at the fairgrounds in October. And the application for the 2024 funding from the Kiwanis Foundation recently launched. It's open through October 6th. If you know organizations that would qualify and may be interested in applying for up to $5,000 in funding from our foundation, please direct them to our website. The grants are, they'll provide for the creation or expansion of initiatives that directly impact youth in Marion County. Finally, on the grants, if you'd like to assist in reviewing the grant submissions in mid-October, please let Kelly know. We need as many diverse eyes and thoughts and perspectives as we can. We have a great amount of money to give away. We can't fund everything that's presented before us, but we would love your help in selecting the organizations that we do, that we will be able to support. I believe that's everything. You've listened to me long enough, so I'm going to turn the mic over to Graham Honecker to introduce today's speaker.
Sorry, a little technical difficulty there. As Trina knows, it's not my strong suit. Before I introduce our main speaker, I do want to clarify something. I'm sure all of you are thinking as I introduce our guest, who has a strong tie to fundraising and Butler, that I arranged this. And for the record, I did not. They will go nameless, but another Kiwanis member said they wanted to hear more about name, image, and likeness. So if we might ask you for money at the end of this, I want to go blameless here. I'm usually guilty of that. So again, Trina can back me up here that I did not make this request to the president, but I really am glad you're here. We're also going to send this video out to a number of others, a number in the Butler community. This is a gentleman I've just gotten to know over the last 2 years and have greatly enjoyed. I enjoy working with A players, and Mark Schabel is an A player, a guy that follows up on everything, really professional, really successful. Mark's background, he'll tell you about the All Good Dawgs organization, name, image, and likeness. But he earned a finance degree with honors in 1992 from Butler. Brings over 30 years of experience to his current position as CEO of Revco Solutions. Had a very rewarding professional career, but his proudest accomplishments are his home, his family, and he is passionate about service. I've met his family. They are great. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but Mark ranks right up there in all the people that I've met at Butler. Some others are on this call as well. You'll go nameless because I don't want to leave anybody out. But Mark, it's a real pleasure to have you. Before we start the Q&A, we're going to do a question and answer session, and then we'll open it up at the end for your questions. But Mark, any introductory remarks before we get going here?
No, just thanks for having me, and thanks for the service that all of you are doing for our communities. I'm a big believer that if each of us jump in and do a little bit to make the world a better place, that we can do that. And you guys are all doing your part. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me.
So Mark, before we jump into the very complex topic of name, image, likeness, and I'm going to grill you on all the ins and outs of it. All Good Dawgs, I'll just give the quick preface here, is an organization that is raising money for NIL being a mechanism for student athletes to earn money based on recent legislation for performing for a college athletics team. Mark, you're busy enough as it is, CEO, family, you've got a place down in Naples area, which I still haven't been invited to yet, but maybe someday. You're a busy guy. How did you get involved with this venture?
Yeah, so Graham, as you said, I'm a 92 graduate of Butler. My wife is a 93 graduate, and both my daughters are grads, and one son-in-law. We've had season tickets since a friend of mine was an assistant coach many years ago, and I actually proposed on campus to my wife. And for the ladies, you may enjoy this. My son-in-law proposed at the same bench in Holcomb Gardens to my daughter that I proposed to my wife. So, you know, I'll pause for the awes and ooze about that. But needless to say, I'm deeply entrenched at Butler. A friend of mine during college was a guy named Thad Mata, who thankfully we've been able to, our athletic department has done a great job of being able to attract him back to be our head coach at Butler. And the day before he took the job, he called and said, we need NIL to be competitive with our players. And it's part of the landscape of college athletics. And I think we'll cover that in a little more in just a moment. But I joke that at the time, you know, number one, I think he called 10 other people who didn't take the call. And I was dumb enough to answer the phone. I also joke that at the time I couldn't spell NIL if you spotted me the N and the I. But we've since worked really hard to figure out NIL. And the reason that I'm involved, to get to your question, Graham, is deeply passionate about Butler, care about our communities, and think that we could combine the two to do something good with something that is good, but has some unique elements that not everyone loves, including myself. So just that opportunity to do something good with it and to help Butler, which I care greatly about.
And real quick, and Mark, I hope I don't get in trouble telling this story, but since he told it recently to a public audience, and I'll condense it, but his first couple weeks on campus, hard to believe he's been with us now about a year and a half. Coach Mata called me into his office and said, "Honaker, what the hell are you doing about NIL? This is really important." And I started sweating bullets and I said, "Coach, I'll get back to you immediately on it," and left the office thinking I might be exiled to Xavier. But thankfully, Mark and a couple others really got this thing up and running. So before we talk about All Good Dogs, Mark, many of us may be familiar with name, image, likeness. Can you articulate really what that is, what it's all about, and a little bit of background on how this got going and has really changed college athletics?
Yeah, Graham, and I'll go ahead and share kind of how this got going as well, which I think answers another question that you have. But name, image, likeness is simply something that an athlete, historically by NCAA rule, student athlete was not allowed to benefit from their name, image, or likeness. And the classic example that you hear is that in the bookstore, the university or a private entity might be selling jerseys of a player with their name and number on it in the past, and the player wasn't allowed to benefit from that. There's been a few lawsuits over these benefits and different things that have happened over the years. And this doesn't just start in recent history, but has been going on for a while. And there's been a lot of talk about, is that fair to the student athletes to say that they can't benefit from the fame they've generated through the skill that they have of being able to perform on an athletic field or court? And so it started in California, where there were laws passed most recently allowing student athletes to benefit, in direct contradiction to the NCAA rule, from their name, image, and likeness. And again, the classic example is jersey sales. It might be you doing media advertising for a local car dealership. Those are sort of the classic examples that I think people thought of when that happened. A few other states followed in passing laws. At that point in time, it was a little chaotic. The NCAA tended to not react. And then at some point in time, the federal courts got involved and ruled that players, that student athletes could benefit from their name, image, and likeness, that the NCAA could not restrict student athletes and take away their scholarship and benefits because they were benefiting from their name, image, and likeness. And so once that happened, it opened the door to a lot, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Immediately players have the ability to make money from their fame. I always remember when Johnny Manziel, I think it got pretty hot when Johnny Manziel was the quarterback. What was his nickname? Johnny Football at Texas A&M, and how much money he might have been able to make if the jersey sales had gone to him instead of, or at least a portion of that. And so now that's legal. Players are taking advantage of it. It frankly is changing the landscape of college athletics. I would say close to daily. It continues to evolve. We're trying to keep our up with everything that's going on, but it's certainly, I think if you ask any coach in America, of certainly the primary revenue generating sports of college football and men's college basketball, particularly, those sports, NIL is probably as big an issue as anything they deal with right now, because players want to know what their opportunity to earn in terms of NIL. Quickly, I'll add a little bit because I'm not sure you're going to ask me about this or not, Graham, but it is legal for a player to benefit from this. It is not legal for a university, a coach, or an alumnus, or a donor, or athletic department to solicit athletes or recruit athletes based on potential NIL or based on NIL benefits. You can't say you're going to get this if you come to school XYZ. Now, having said that, it does impact recruiting because players understand what the NIL program is at a particular university, and they might know and have the ability, it's legal for them to know what players in the past have been able to benefit. You all probably could guess that not every university is probably following that guidelines, but we at Butler are, and that's the way we do things. That's the way our administration insists on doing things. That's the way our athletic department and you know, Barry Collier leads our athletic department, and man of utmost integrity, and you know, would insist on that we do it the right way. And so that's what we're doing there. But certainly in college athletics, I'm sure it's not all done that way.
So Mark, let's talk about All Good Dawgs. And first of all, if you could help define what a collective is. I think we keep hearing this term in conjunction with NIL. And so what's a collective? And then talk about the All Good Dawgs model, because again, I'm certainly biased about how Butler does things, but when you guys got this off the ground, you wanted to say, we want to structure this as close as possible to the Butler way. Yep. In terms of giving back. So if you can define a collective and talk about how the All Good Dawgs model works.
Yeah, so I can look at our pictures and see that some of you have gray hair like I do. And my guess is when you hear of NIL, not every thought you have is a good one, right? There's certainly the thought that athletes get a scholarship and that, you know, that's enough, or that do we really want players to sort of go to the highest bidder especially for places that are not following the rules. And so there's an element of NIL that many of us don't like, it, frankly, including myself. But one of the tenets of what we call the Butler way at Butler, and you know, that starts with the way Tony Hinkle did things, all the way to when Coach Collier was involved, and Coach Mata, and they, you know, codified this idea of the Butler way. And one of the tenets is to accept reality. Well, reality is NIL is here. And so how are we going to do it at Butler? And the idea was, we're going to do it the Butler way, and we're going to do it differently. And we're going to do it in a way that does good for the world and teaches our student athletes and helps them develop as young men and women. And so I've described already NIL opportunities that are sort of the for-profit or commercial realm. In other words, a for-profit business can contract directly with a student athlete to either sell t-shirts with their name on it, to do advertising for the business, whatever it is, and they can pay them directly for their name, image, and likeness. No different than someone in entertainment, right? But this idea of a collective is what we gravitated toward, because we believe that we could do good for the world along with providing NIL opportunities for student athletes. Which, you know, I also want to say, by the way, my daughter was a walk-on student athlete at Butler, and you know, it's a job. And so I don't really think it's a bad thing for players to have some financial support outside the scholarship. But we felt like we could do even more than that. And the way that a collective works and the way that we've gone about it is a collective allows non-businesses to get involved in NIL. And so if you're a business, certainly you can contract directly with a player or a student athlete. But if you're an individual, and as Graham said, we certainly will take donations from all of you. If you're an individual, you can donate to a collective. And what we've done is at Butler and all Good Dawgs, we've established partnerships with non-for-profit partners who would not be able to afford to pay for the awareness that they can garner from having a student athlete either put social media posts out, show up at events. There's a lot of different ways that a student athlete can raise awareness for a non-for-profit organization that's doing good in the world, but the non-for-profits can't necessarily afford to pay for them. And so what All Good Dawgs does is we contract with a non-for-profit, and we contract with a student athlete, and we are the liaison that ends up ultimately paying the student athlete to do services for the non-for-profit to help them raise funds, raise awareness, anything that completes the mission of the non-for-profit in doing service and good for the world. And some examples of the partners that we partnered with. One actually last night, our entire men's basketball team went to Riley Children's Hospital, and not only did they interact with kids there who are sick, and if any of you have kids that have gone through illnesses, that's big to help their morale. Our players also started a fundraiser, an online fundraiser where they're raising funds for the Riley Children's Foundation. And so All Good Dawgs helped to facilitate by providing the opportunity for our student athletes to go and do that work for Riley Children's Hospital. And we think that they're doing great good for the world. And at the same time, it's allowing student athletes to have this opportunity. The other thing that I think was a big emphasis of ours is what the student athletes could learn. It's clear to me that all of you on this call understand what service does for us. Like, you're doing something for the world, but not more importantly, but probably more true, it's doing something for us, right? It's doing something in our hearts, doing good for the world. You get true joy from doing something for someone else, not from doing stuff for yourself. And so we're giving these athletes a baseline for the rest of their lives to know that joy that you can get from doing something for somebody else. Yeah, they're benefiting from it, but at least they're getting introduced to that, and not everybody does. My father-in-law and mother-in-law introduced me to serving, and it's changed my life, and we're doing that for the players. They're also getting a little bit of business experience. There's contracts involved. They're getting financial advice. And so we think it enhances the student athlete experience along with doing good for the world. Other nonprofits that we benefited, the Martin Luther King Center, which helps underprivileged children, Project 44, which matches donors for bone marrow transplants, lots of organizations. Last year, we partnered with 13 different non-for-profit organizations. Each of our players in the men's basketball program had the opportunity to serve one of these organizations, and we've gotten feedback that it's done a lot of good. Some of their best fundraisers, some of their best outcomes came when our players were involved. Our players were announcing on social media, announcing on campus, doing different things to get people involved. And so, we've taken something that was a necessary thing to have for recruitment, and turned it into something good. And we think that is the way we do things at Butler.
Thanks. As some of you know, I'm on the Project 44 board. Chuck Harris was our representative last year, and we do drives to get people to sign up for bone marrow registry, and he promoted one on campus, and it was the largest drive we've ever had. So that's an example. I did put in the chat, the team has a $2,000 goal to reach for Riley that they set yesterday. I think they're at about 1,200. So I know you guys are generous in a lot of ways, but I did put that in the chat if you want to help them. Mark, moving on here, one of the questions is, and we've been getting this a lot, how do smaller schools like Butler compete? You have the Kansases and the Dukes and, the Kentuckys, and hopefully nobody's a Kentucky fan, but they've actually been doing this for about 50 years, paying players. Anyway, I digress, but, I believe we can compete. A number of folks here believe we can compete. We've had great support from Barry Collier and Jim Danko. What is your opinion on when you get that question?
Yeah, and so first of all, as you pointed out, Graham, it's not a new problem, whether it was cheating or just budgets, right? As a small school, you have to do more with less. I'll quickly throw in my favorite quote about the NCAA. Jerry Tarkanian famously said that the NCAA and sort of their hypocrisy, that they were so angry with Kentucky over their violations that they put Cleveland State on probation. The big schools tend to get away with it, and the smaller schools tend to get punished. And so, as a smaller school, I think that's always been the case. NIL adds a new wrinkle to it. I think I can't speak for every school, but I think you've got to find your way to compete. And Butler historically has found their way to compete, which obviously has led to some great success in men's basketball and other sports. We've done well in other sports as well. We have a smaller, but a passionate alumni base. And it means something to people. And, we have people on this call and others that have jumped in and have given of their time. Our board's an all volunteer board. And so I think you have to have people who are passionate about what the university represents. And I think I mentioned the Butler way, and some people may get tired of hearing that, but it's real and it's true that you rally around that, right? If you're not rallying around something to believe in, if it's just sports success or not sports success, I just don't think you're as passionate. And so I think you have to rally around something. I'll point out one other thing that I continue to point out to folks is while it's difficult to compete with larger schools, one of the advantages we have is the approach we've taken to football. And that is, at Butler, football is non-scholarship. And we have a great football program for a non-scholarship, and we compete very well. But we don't have to fund 60 football players the way other schools do. And so if we're competing against an Indiana or a Purdue or a Notre Dame in state, their collective has to raise money for NIL deals for all of those athletes. We can focus on, what we hope to do is focus on our men's basketball to start with, and then expand that to women's basketball, to women's tennis, to men's cross country, all of the other things. But we don't have to fund football the way it has to be done at larger schools in order to compete at the highest levels in college football. We all know where money goes. And so I think those are some of the ways that as a small school, we're going about being competitive.
We have some good questions in the chat. I'm going to wrap up with one or two, and then we'll address these. Mark, some people have actually said in 4 or 5 years, they see NIL diminishing, that it's just not going to have the sustained impact that it does now. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's honestly anybody's guess. I don't think it's going away quickly. There are rumblings at the IRS to change the way this is treated from an IRS perspective, from a tax perspective. I know that there's been legislation introduced, or at least talked about being introduced. I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you. It's not going away right away. It's going to be here for now. we're going to go about it, as if it's going to be around and adjust to it if it's not.
Last question I've got, and then we've got some good ones, like I said, in the chat. By the way, I often put my foot in my mouth, which you guys are aware of. I just forgot. My mom lives down in Louisville and is a lifelong Kentucky fan. So I hope she's not listening to this Zoom call. Probably not getting a Christmas gift this year. But, Mark, I thought one of the interesting dynamics was this year's Final Four, where you had sort of the poster child for NIL to date, which is Miami. If you've read the story, Miami had a kid from Indianapolis, actually, named Nigel Pack, who was at Kansas State, was recruited to Miami. Somehow Miami may not have paid attention to the rules because his incentive to come there was, I think, a 2-year, $800,000 NIL deal to represent a company. So they were on one side of the equation. And then you have Florida Atlantic University on the other side that, for all intents and purposes, had zero NIL presence. Thoughts on, Butler made the great Cinderella runs in 2010 and 2011, Florida Atlantic last year. Your opinion on, can there be more Florida Atlantics without the millions of dollars with name, image, and likeness?
Yeah. So I think there can. I think it's difficult. I think it's really challenging. I think what Butler did, I've heard it said that 2010 and 2011 back-to-back national championship game appearances. I've heard people say it might be the greatest accomplishment in sports. And I don't disagree that for a school that was at the time in the Horizon League, an unbelievable achievement. And I don't think that's easy to do, or others would do it, right? Having said that, I think the great thing about basketball, and I'm a little biased. I'm certainly from a basketball background and grew up in Indiana and played. There's only 5 on the court at the same time, and you get a couple really good ones, and some role players to do their job around them, and it's amazing what you can do. And I know Coach Mata, and I told you guys why I'm doing this, because I believe in him. I believe in Butler. I believe he's one of the best 5 coaches in college basketball, and he understands that he's not going to have the same budget at Butler that Kentucky has, or Kansas has, or name the school. So what I would say to that in conclusion, Graham, is do I think Butler, in order to be consistently competitive, do we need NIL? Absolutely, I do. But do I still believe you can be competitive with less? That's part of being a Bulldog, and I for sure believe you can be competitive with less. And I still think there will be the occasional Cinderella story that happens.
I agree wholeheartedly. I was asked this recently in a presentation I gave, and we're not going to get into the transfer portal today because that's a whole nother meeting, but I still believe that the teams that can hold players for 3 to 4 years, that build a true team, and Florida Atlantic was an example of that. And the Florida Atlantic coach would actually tell you there were other big schools who started recruiting their players before they even got to the Final Four. That's how sort of cutthroat it is. But I still am a believer that you have to have an NIL presence, but I do believe there's more coming of the underdogs. So
I think 2 things make it more difficult for smaller schools, Graham. Number one, it's harder to keep those players for 4 years because they will get enticed by NIL contracts at larger schools, and especially the schools who are cheating, who are explicitly doing that. And then the larger schools, there's going to be fringe NBA players like Oscar Schwebe at Kentucky and Trace Jackson Davis and Zach Edey at Purdue. All 3 of those guys prior to NIL probably go pro before they did. But because they were able to earn a significant amount of money while still in college, they took the approach of waiting another year before they go. And I think that helps the big schools, because the small schools don't benefit from the big schools being young, right? One of the reasons the small schools can make a run is they're playing against freshmen and sophomores, and they've got juniors and seniors. And I think that'll be less the case than it used to be.
That's great. And if you look, thank you to Sally and Trina, put some pictures in the chat of the team's visit to Riley yesterday. So really appreciate that. Also, as I'm monitoring the Riley link, we've had $300 come in since we had announced that. No surprise to how generous you all are as Kiwanis. So we've got some good questions. And Mark, I'm going to fire these off to you. Greg Silver, by the way, Greg's father taught at Butler for 40 plus years, was a dean at one point. He asks, can you clarify the model of how the players receive compensation? He asks, does Riley contribute money to the players, BU, who go there to help Riley with his patients? How is that done?
Riley does not, Greg. So that's the great thing for the non-for-profit. And Riley may not be our greatest example in terms of that's a pretty strong organization. But take, for example, Project 44, which is not as well known and not as probably well funded. The fact that All Good Dawgs pays the players as opposed to the non-for-profit having to do that, essentially the non-for-profit benefits from this for free. And again, Riley probably could afford to do it if they wanted to, but a lot of organizations can't.
I'll just tack on real quick, Mark. How did you guys seek out the not-for-profits you work with? And if somebody in this call knew of one that might be interested in connecting with All Good Dawgs, how does that happen?
Yeah, so I put our website in the chat, which was an accomplishment for me to start with from a technical perspective. I'm pretty proud of myself. You can contact us, our contact information, if you do have an idea. We have a criteria on our board where we look for organizations that are doing good for the world, that we do place a priority if there's a Butler connection. Project 44 came about from one of our former players, Andrew Smith, that passed away, and his family started Project 44. But certainly anything that's doing good for the world that needs it, right? That's especially true as if that organization doesn't have the budget to do this kind of thing. This is those organizations that we want. So feel free, if you have an organization, put us in touch with them. Doesn't mean for sure that we'll do it, but at least we put them on our list.
Great. Bill Murphy, one of my favorite donors. I don't say that about everybody, right, Trina? Has a bit of a complex question, but has another question that makes my heart warm. He says, are these contributions deductible for tax purposes? I would like to send All Good Dawgs money from my donor advised fund. Is that possible?
Great question, Bill. So the answer is we are a 501c3. We're a tax exempt organization. And so all donations to All Good Dawgs should be tax deductible. I will caveat that I'm not a CPA, not a tax advisor or an attorney. Having said that, I will tell you there's legislation, or there's a memo out there from IRS attorneys that some of you may have seen that could change at some point in time. There's talk of taking away that tax exempt from collectives. I frankly think their argument does not apply to All Good Dawgs because it's about the collective good that we're doing in the world as opposed to the private good. And we're doing a lot of public good. But yeah, it should be tax deductible based on the fact that we're a 501c3. Bill, I give through my donor advised fund. I will tell you that if Fidelity is your donor advised fund, I had some problems there and I had to do it through Putnam. And there's also one through an organization called Crouse, Campus Crusade for Christ. That is one you can do through a donor advised fund as well. And what I did learn, Bill, is you can actually transfer, if you have a Fidelity, you can actually start another one and transfer from Fidelity to the other one to facilitate the donor advice gift.
And Bill, I'll be calling you about 1:01 p.m. here.
Exactly.
Talk more about that. So Trina asked, will the culture you're creating with the NIL collective's emphasis on community service help with retention of players?
Yeah, I think the right kind of kid, which is what we've always emphasized at Butler. I've got a chance to know our kids. Man, it just invigorates me and makes me more of a fan. I hate to single anybody out, but I'm seeing the pictures that were put out there. John Michael Malloy, from local kid here from Carmel. My word, is he a fantastic young man. That just, I mean, I'm hoping I get to work for him someday, because I think he'll be running, all kinds of companies, and maybe he'll give me a job when I'm older. But I think the kids that are the right fit for Butler, it will be a retention tool.
I would say on a personal note, my wife and I hosted the entire team over for dinner last night, which I think we shut City Barbecue down for a day with the amount of food that we had to order. But, again, they came to the dinner right after their time at Riley, and I could tell the camaraderie that they're building. We have 9 new players, experiences like that. Some of them are 18 years old. I don't think I got started volunteering when I was that young. I could barely get out of bed. And these guys, so again, I just saw from a personal viewpoint of, the after effect of coming off of Riley. So we've got time for a couple more questions. And any other questions for Mark?
Well, I'll do Graham's job for him here. If any of you can donate to the Riley link, I think it would be encouraging to not only the kids at Riley, but to the young men who are trying to do some good and see that fruit pay off. And obviously, of course, if you want to donate to All Good Dogs, the link is on the chat, and we'll certainly do good things with that. To date, 94% of our funds have gone towards helping not-for-profits with that awareness. We're doing this on a shoestring, and volunteer folks jumping in and doing what they can. We're getting some support from the university, from folks like Graham. When we need something, they're willing to help us. And I really do believe we're doing some good in the world. Hopefully we can continue that. So thanks for your time, and appreciate you having me.
Mark, we've got another question here, which is a really good one. I should have addressed it. Roger Cummings asked, if there is a standout athlete in another sport than men's basketball, i.e. women's tennis, soccer, are they eligible for the NIL?
Yeah, great question, Roger. So they absolutely are eligible. We call our student athlete ambassadors, and any student athlete at Butler is eligible to be an ambassador. They have to apply, which is not, there's no big standard. They just have to apply and fill out an application. It helps us understand their market value and understand their, what they're doing in the world, what their interests. We ask them what they're talk about, how we pick our charities. One of the factors is what players are passionate about. So if a player has a passion for a particular cause, we certainly try to match them up. Our donors, Roger, are the ones that sort of at this stage in our development, which is very early. We've just been doing this a little over a year. Our donors actually get the opportunity to designate what sport. To date, men's basketball has been the thing people want to give towards. But, my daughter played women's basketball. If someone were to say, I want to donate $5,000 and I'd like it to go towards women's basketball, we will find women's basketball players and give them that opportunity.
Terrific. And I would just conclude by saying, again, the whole NIL thing, I'm not entirely thrilled about myself, but I do love the All Good Dogs model. By the way, real quickly, female athletes, there are some female athletes who have been the largest partners, beneficiaries of NIL. I think there's a gymnast at LSU that I think has made $5 to $7 million. Caitlin Clark, I know, is doing very well at Iowa. So, and we definitely want to work on that here at Butler. Our women's soccer team may very well be the best program we've had since we joined the Big East Conference. So But I would say I really do admire what All Good Dogs is doing to give back to the community. There are a few other collectives like this out in the country doing so, but really appreciative to Mark, to Rick Donovan, his partner, and the All Good Dogs board, who have really helped get this thing moving in the right direction. Before I turn it back to Trina, we've raised $500 since we started this call for the Riley Fund. So the team is less than $400 away from hitting their goals. So Mark, thank you again for joining us. I'm going to turn it back over to our president.
Perfect. Thank you, Graham. Mark, thank you many, many times over for taking time out of your day today and making us a little bit smarter and a little bit more connected to our community. As we alluded to at the beginning of the program, a donation will be made in your honor. This quarter, we're making donations to Report for America. It's a national service program that connects early career journalists with newsrooms across the country to fill undercovered beats. Specifically, this donation will go to the Indy Star to help cover K-12 education reporter Caroline Beck, who is able to dive into the issues facing families, children, and educators in Marion County's township school districts. So with that, please enjoy the rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you at the Columbia Club next Thursday at noon. We're adjourned.